Welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you're here today as I move back and forth in my new swivel chair. I got this new chair from IKEA. It fits my rump like a glove. It's really nice. And it swivels back and forth. Anyway, welcome back to the second half, I think the last section, episode of How to Build a Miles Davis Jazz Vinyl Collection, subtitled A Look at My Miles Davis Vinyl Collection, because I don't have all of the records. And what really amazes me is I've listened to all these records, starting out with Miles' first record on Prestige, which I covered in the last video, up to the sort of breakoff point, 7 Steps to Heaven, and then more recently listening to the beginning of the second great quintet up to the final album I have by Miles Davis, AGHARTA. When Miles first hit the scene after Juilliard, he's playing with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, he's working himself in to play those bebop forms. And then he establishes a form, a way of playing jazz with the first great quintet, codifying and pointing the direction forward for everyone else at that time and into the future with his illustrious quartet of Coltrane, Philly Joe Jones, Red Garland, and Paul Chambers on bass, on Milestones augmented by Cannonball Adderley, and on Kinda Blue, which I'll get to in a minute. Then you go into the 60s quintet, and he starts opening up things. He opens up the way improvisation is approached, the way melody is approached, the way rhythm is approached, particularly with Tony Williams, who's such an incredible innovator in music, not just on the drums. And then Bitches Brewing in a Silent Way, which are records with forms to a degree, but it's also opening further. Miles opening up what he does even more so to a large ensemble. On Bitches Brew, there are up to 12 people playing at a time. And also the forms was kind of an ambient thing happening. And then you go into the other albums post that, where you start to run into records that are compilations, which is a little strange, or Big Fun, I believe it is, where half of the album is studio and the other half is the Lost Quintet, more or less, at the cellar door just burning. But on Bitches Brew, Live Evil, Water Babies, AGHARTA, he's opening up even more, opening up to affect his own horn with wah-wah effects, with delays, with looping, and everything becomes very fragmented. It's never entirely free, but it's weird. You know, if you listen to the Live Evil, which is half and half, that's the one that's half studio and half live, they might open up with a basic theme, but then they just exploded. And everyone's free to come in and out of the improvisation. Bitches Brew, Miles just handed the group some basic chords and they went at it. So you get this kind of ethereal, everyone sort of thinking and reacting in the same time. So it just amazes me as Miles' career expands and goes in to greater depth, and throughout history as he gets older, it expands and expands and expands until the end, where he went back almost to pop forms, very simple things, tutu, siesta, even decoy. Before that period in the 80s, he's still opening up. You hear John Scofield doing a lot of influences brought, and almost kind of a scientific robo kind of sound, but at the end he goes back to pop, very simple formats. And that for me sort of backs up my argument. I think John Coltrane would have done that if he had lived, because he'd gone as far out as he can go. I think he would have gone back to playing simple music, maybe just blues, but I think he would have found a different way. But anyway, I'll go into greater detail on these Miles albums and why I think that. But I wanted to address Kinda Blue again. John DeVore Fidelli, did a series of videos with me, and we talked about Kinda Blue, and some people, what did people say? I got hate mail. I lack integrity. I'm disingenuous. How dare I comment on the greatest jazz record of all time? Folks, it's not the greatest jazz record of all time. It's definitely one of the greatest jazz records of all time. And I understand why people love this record so much. It's one of the most beautiful recordings in jazz. In many ways, Kinda Blue is a perfect album. Miles couldn't have mapped it out more beautifully. And even the sound of this record is different from all the other Miles Davis records. All the Gil Evans stuff, Porgy and Bess, even Miles Ahead, the second great quintet, they're a little group in the giant hall church that was 30th Street Studios. And so some of those records, the band sounds kind of washed out. I have the MoFi reissues of the second great quintet, And to a degree, they're much more upfront. Everything is clearer. The Kind of Blue sounds like it was recorded in a different studio. It's almost as if they moved the baffles around the group because it's very intimate. It's very close. And I think that intimacy is one reason why people love this record so much. This record has beautiful solos on. Everything is extremely concise. There's not a wasted note on this record. It sounds like no other Miles Davis record. Even though I think Something Else is a pretty amazing record too, even though that's a Cannonball Adderley record. And Miles is on it, it's kind of a Miles record too. But I understand the many reasons this record is loved. The problem I have, and why as I'm seeing the old grouch when it comes to KOB, I've had my Jazz Vinyl Lovers group for, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years. And when I see people posting their collection of Kind of Blue records, 10 records, 20 records, 25 records of the issues of the same record, it goes beyond, it has nothing at that point to do with the music. It's become a fetish. And a fetish either to be accepted or to impress people or to spend money or to show your lack of imagination. I don't know. I understand this is a beautiful record, and I thought to myself, there are other equally beautiful recordings by some of the greatest people in jazz who don't get as much attention. Duke Ellington's Indigos. That is an incredibly beautiful scripted album. The moods, the harmonies on that record are just stunning. Written by a real master who Miles would bow down to. He bowed down to Monk and Ellington. And Indigos is a beautiful recording. I think about Charles Mingus and a few separate tunes he wrote. Peggy's Blue Skylight, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, Duke Ellington's Sound of Love. Those are sublime compositions and recordings, just profound recordings. As long as labels see people buy things, they'll keep reissuing them. They're going to keep reissuing this album, I'd say, for another 20 years. Because the Miles Davis estate seems to enjoy milking everything possible out of his catalog. Sony Legacy loves it, of course. And just people, that's why I go kind of crazy. Why the fetishism over this record? I truly don't get it. I have one copy, and this copy's for sale. I have this thing memorized. Who doesn't? But it's a beautiful record. Bill Evans, Kind of Blue, his song, Blue and Green, the saddest song of all time, which has an amazing Coltrane solo on it, an equally amazing Cannonball Adderley solo. My point is, don't fetishize over one record. Because while you're fetishizing and wondering where your copy is that you've ordered off Amazon or wherever, there are all these other records out there waiting for you. And there's also, I understand that if you don't live in New York City or in an urban center, you have to use websites to buy records. But there's also something to be said for hitting your thrift stores, going out on the hunt, taking a chance. You never know what you'll find. In our Jazz Vinyl Lovers group, people post things they found in thrift stores that are kind of shocking sometimes. The things they find for like $2 or $3. That's like old school prices. Anyway, hopefully the last time, and I'm sure I'll get hate mail about that. So the second great quintet, Herbie Hancock, Ron Carter, Wayne Shorter, Miles Davis, Tony Williams, had a profound influence on jazz, drawing from the avant-garde, drawing from classical music, drawing on just their own brilliant musicianship. 5 of the greatest musicians who ever lived, period. And we're very blessed to still have Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter with us, still making incredible music. Those 5 albums, ESP, Miles Smiles, Sorcerer, Nefertiti, Miles in the Sky, Phillies de Kilimanjaro, 1, 2, 3, 6 albums, are breathtaking in their originality, in their boldness. They sound like nothing else by any group ever. And they're just magical records. The first great quintet is brilliant. They created that format, and you hear a group on those Prestige records at the height of their powers. But the second great quintet, mirrored the 60s in its explosiveness, but it's so incredibly alive and visceral. Even to this day, when I listen to those records, if you want to fetishize something, those records are phenomenal. Each one of them is a masterpiece in my book. And you hear the group changing as they record each record. So in the first group, as the second great quintet, we see Miles taking full advantage of Wayne Shorter's compositions. As we see through all 6 of those records, Wayne is a major voice, as much of a major voice as a composer and arranger as he is a saxophonist. As a saxophonist, he kind of dances around the whole thing. He's such a mythological figure in a way. He's a living being, but there's something so surreal and abstract about Wayne Shorter as a composer, and so deep and profound. But that first album, it's interesting. The first album has 2 or 3 Ron Carter compositions, Little One and RJ, which have more solid forms. the group is playing forms. They're not playing that free yet. I don't think maybe one more album after that first one does Ron Carter get 2 tunes, because it largely becomes the Wayne Shorter show with additions, with inclusions from Herbie and Tony. They can change radically in an instant. They are all listening so intently, and in a way, they're all playing for each other. They're 5 guys in a room playing for each other, because they never played these compositions live. Live, the group, even this group, would play the standards they've been playing forever. I don't know why, but the studio really became a place for concept albums, and you hear them listening so incredibly, and they're reacting so quickly to each other, and ESP is the beginning of that. ESP 1965. Miles Smiles 1967, we have 3 Wayne Shorter tunes, no Herbie tunes, and 1 tune by Miles. I must have that wrong. And already, second album out, we have 2 Wayne Shorter classics, Orbits and Footprints, and 2 covers, which is unusual. There are no other covers on any of the other second great Quintet albums. Freedom Jazz Dance and Gingerbread Boy. Freedom Jazz Dance by Eddie Harris, which is a jazz standard now, and Gingerbread Boy is a standard to a degree. The thing about Wayne Shorter is all his melodies are so strong, and to me they're instantly memorable, and they're in a way instantly recognizable as him. His tunes don't sound anything like Herbie's tunes. Herbie's tunes are a little more concrete in their forms. The heads are more like, here's the head. Wayne is like, he kind of slides it in, slips it in. And Tony stuff, in a way, all the Tony compositions he contributed to the second great Quintet are all very free and avant-garde to a degree, which makes sense because his first 2 albums on Blue Note, Spring and Lifetime, are very avant-garde, very surreal and spacious and abstract. So in a way, we hear Tony Williams this early on contributing something totally individual and unique, as he would do later when he broke off from Miles and founded Lifetime and invented fusion as we know it. On all these records, if you listen to the solos and just follow it, it's just a maze of beauty, and they're winding and listening, and anything can happen. It's instant possibility. And all these records remain utter classics, and tributes to individuality and creativity. And as I said, Miles slowly opening up the canon. Sorcerer in 1967, 4 Wayne tunes, 1 Tony tune, 1 Herbie tune. Opening with Herbie's Prince of Darkness, which is sublime, a beautiful song. 1967, Sorcerer. 4 Wayne Shorter compositions, 1 Tony Williams composition, 1 Herbie Hancock composition. The album opens up with Herbie's Prince of Darkness, which is a sublime song. It's like sunlight beaming through clouds, I wrote down here. The group is amazing at following Tony as he deconstructs the rhythms, as the music just splays outward. Anything can happen. I think Miles was giving trumpet nods to give certain directions in the studio. Second track, Tony's Pee-wee, intimate, meditative. Then Wayne's Mascalero, dissonant chords, haunting. Beautiful interplay. The interplay on these records is profound. Wayne's Limbo, open side 2, followed by Wayne's Veneta. Veneta kind of reminds me of a Weather Report tune. You can hear the beginning of his way of thinking. Veneta's hard charging. I've read some people think Sorcerer forecast in a silent way. I don't really hear that. And the album ends with that strange Nothing Like You with the vocal by Bob Dorough, which is uncanny and kind of weird. Nefertiti, 1968. 3 Wayne songs, 2 Tony songs, 2 Herbie songs. This album contains Fall by Wayne, which is one of his great masterpieces, as is the opening track, Nefertiti. The group is opening up even more, becoming more avant-garde, more beautiful, more surreal. Fall is a real piece of interplay, improvisation, deconstruction, of listening. These guys really know how to listen to each other. Music just washes over you, this entire album. And Tony is just on fire throughout. This includes Pinocchio, which is another Wayne Shorter standard, which they did play in Weather Report from time to time. 1968, Miles in the Sky. This album includes George Benson on guitar, on 1 track, Paraphernalia. 2 Miles songs, 1 Wayne song, 1 Tony song. And this is an odd album. It's sort of contained in a way on Stuff. It's more of a 4/4 groove, which is unusual at this point. The Miles tunes are more concrete, less ethereal than what Tony or Wayne contributes. Tony contributes black comedy, which kind of swings in a standard way. Then I believe Herbie contributes Country Sun, which has a kind of a burning up tempo feel, sort of like 4 and More. The first Miles record I ever bought was called Basic Miles, which was a collection of late 50s stuff. And the second record I bought was Four and More when I was starting to study jazz drumming. And that record, and I know that record had a huge impact on many musicians, but Tony is just, you know, he's 15 and he's just on fire, and that whole album is just keeling over. The energy is so profound. And I didn't know until just recently that My Funny Valentine is and Four and More recorded on the same night. It's like the first set and the second set. I don't think I have it absolutely right. It was recorded in '64, not long after the assassination of JFK, and apparently Miles was thinking about that. That night was actually to raise money for the NAACP. And so My Funny Valentine, I think, are more medium tempo songs, and Four and More is just like blistering out of the gate. And it's just, I don't have a copy of it now because it's hard to find an early pressing of that, but what an amazing high velocity record that is. 1969, Kilimanjaro, or Filets de Kilimanjaro. All the titles are in French. All the compositions are by Miles Davis. And the album is extremely open. Some of it almost sounds like just a riff and then a jam, a blowout. This has some of Tony Williams with the most amazing drumming on it. And this is the last album by the Quintet. And why we're hearing all Miles tunes, I don't know. Either Miles is taking greater control or the other guys are starting to hold back their tunes. But this includes some of Tony Williams' most provocative, open, hallucinatory, surreal drumming. It's just astounding the stuff he plays on this record. Philon Brune is mostly a tonally solo with some Wayne Shorter in the end. Tout de Suite, slow, meditative, voidless, almost aimless sounding. Little Stuff, just another riff and a crazy ass jam. The title track has a long melody, kind of a sunny track, very hovering. Bitches Brew, 1970, a revolutionary album, a very wide open album, another perfect album for Miles Davis. This is the recent reissue. This is the 40th anniversary box that came out a little while ago. The story is, I believe that Miles just gave the musicians, who are up to 12 musicians at a time, just gave them basic chords, and we just hear them building off of that. So the album is very ethereal and meditative and hovering, but it's never boring. It just flows so beautifully into so many different things, and each musician is adding so many little colors over each pocket, each groove the musicians lay down. The musicians include Miles, Wayne Shorter, Lenny White, Benny Maupin, Chick Corea, Jim Riley, percussion, Jack DeJohnette, Harvey Brooks, Charles Elias, Don Elias, Dave Holland, John McLaughlin. And this album is constructed of tape edits that Tio Macero took the tapes and edited compositions out of them, and now with today's higher resolution you can hear all the edits, but that doesn't take away from how profound this record is. 4 Miles tunes, 1 Wayne tune, and each track has amazing character, personality, but they're all part of this suite really that works so beautifully. And it's the beginning of Miles starting to use effects, loops, delays, greater decay, reverb on his trumpet. He's playing more abstractly, he's playing less. I mean, I don't think this album could have happened at any other time. It's so beautiful the way everything flows together and flows out. It's almost like an all-night surreal drug session where people are coming in and out of the loft, taking something, playing, going mad, playing some more, then leaving, and somebody else comes through. It's such a beautiful album, and it maintains its beauty, as does Silent Way. I don't really have a copy of Silent Way. I have this weird Sony bastardization early minor. Don't get me going on all that. Sony Legacy they've reissued a lot of records. That's all I'll say about that. 1971, Live Evil. This begins the era of the very controversial Miles Davis recordings. This album is half studio, half recorded at the cellar door with Chick Corea, Jack DeJohnette. I think Michael Henderson's already on bass. The live tunes are absolutely on fire. Some of Jack DeJohnette's greatest drumming, they're just off the chain. Super high energy, high velocity that make the studio tracks sound a little tame. Studio tracks are much more subtle. They're much more compositions. They're almost chamber jazz in a way. And when they're bordered with these amazing high energy live tracks, it's really, really amazing. Now this is the era when people start to say, oh, it's not jazz. Anything these guys play on this lineup, which includes DeJohnette, Gary Bartz, John McLaughlin, Michael Henderson, Keith Jarrett, Ron Carter, Dave Holland, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, everything they play is jazz. Jazz musicians spend years perfecting their craft, listening, honing their instrument, composing to match up to the incredible competition they face when they come to this city. Everything any great jazz musician plays is jazz.